So today we are really appreciate for your kindness to give the Dhamma Talk for all practitioners at Camp Sun. So right now, please allow me to read briefly biography of Ajahn Sunandho. Ajahn Sunandho was born in Fullerton, California, USA, and raised as Catholic. He first studied psychology at Fullerton Junior College, then changed to Rancho San Diego College to study fire science. He has worked at Disneyland and also at the law firm for a few years. Then his interest in Buddhist practice led to taking the opportunity to live as a novice for 2 years in Mahayana Temple in Taiwan in 2001. He then became interested in the Vajrayana school of Buddhism and decided to become Vajrayana novice, spending a few years in Dhammasala, studying and practicing Tibetan Buddhism in 2002. He became interested in Visuddhimagga, Four Satipatthana and Four Noble Truths, and began to practice meditation in Mahasi Sayadaw style in 2003. He sought and found traditional style Theravadan practice monastery in Ubon Ratchathani, Thailand. Finally, deciding to reordain as Theravadan novice in Thailand and was ordained as Bhikkhu in 2547 Buddhist era at Wat Nong Pa Phong, Ubon Ratchathani, in the lineage of Ajahn Chah. So now I would like to take this opportunity to invite Than Prajan to give the Dhamma talk from now. So please, Than Prajan.
May I ask the permission of the senior monk to speak on Dhamma? That's all. Yes, sir. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Sabbhe dhammang nalang abhivinesaya. Ting. Good morning, everyone. I'd actually like to start by inviting everyone to please sit comfortably. And one of the very good conditions for practice is comfort and a feeling of contentment. So please sit as you feel most comfortable. And please don't worry about wearing blankets or jackets. It's quite wonderful. Myself this morning, I'm experiencing a bit of kind of what you call a natural anatta experience. I feel my body is actually shaking from the cold. And this is actually a very good, very easy way to see kind of like anatta, not self. It's kind of, there's no real kind of idea or concept that the body should actually shake, or that you don't really want the legs to shake, but it kind of happens naturally. So this is a very easy way to see anatta. Also too, when you can even see on a day like today, say for example, the body, in a way, you want it to be one way, you want it to be comfortable, but say for example, if you have some very hot tea in the morning, you notice this creates a lot of happiness. This is just kind of a natural condition of the body. So you can see it's kind of very easy way to see kind of anatta, the not self of the body. And today I will be speaking on the Dhutanga practices and how they tie into, or how they lead into mindfulness, and how this ties into practice. I'd actually first like to mention, even before starting about the Dhutangas, the kind of precursors to the Dhutangas. Kind of the general outline from the Buddha himself was, as in many places in the suttas, in many teachings to many different monks, the classic teaching that the Buddha would often reflect or would give is any practice that you take on which actually you can see for yourself that your wholesome qualities increase and your unwholesome qualities decrease, then you know that for sure that this is a proper practice for you. So this is definitely proper to be said of the Dhutangas as well. The term Dhutanga is actually a very specific word. It's generally kind of taught by analogy. It's almost as if like as if you had a kind of dirty carpet or dirty blanket, and you were to take that blanket or that carpet or that rug and you were to shake it off. This kind of shaking off, this is the one of the meanings of the term Dhutanga. So it's the idea of shaking off or letting go, or also like abandoning, letting go. So this is a very common theme, of course, in for practitioners, especially in retreat. The general theme of most retreats is having the mind become tranquil and delighting in the stillness of the mind, as well as letting go. So this is actually where this is where Dhutangas can be applied, but the Dhutangas are a voluntary practice. So generally, as far as I know, in most cases, the Buddha would generally have people start with the basic practices first. Say, for example, if someone has recently gone forth, the Buddha would generally have them put forth effort to develop basic right view. So say, for example, if I were to kind of mention, just in the general sense, if people were to reflect on 4 basic things, this is actually kind of taken from different places in the suttas. But as a general reflection, like say, for example, if one were to reflect thus, this body, my own body, or this body, is of the nature to die, is impermanent by its nature. So this ties into this is the very first expression of Anyakondanyo. This is the yang kinchi samudaya dhammang sabantang nirodha dhammang. This is the whatever is of the nature to arise is of the nature to cease. So this is applicable to everything. So when you apply it to the body, this body, in the birth of this body, of my body, of all of our bodies, in the birth of the body is its death. So inherent, this is Wapola Rahula's translation, inherent within the origination is its disillusionment. So in other words, when it is born, its nature is to die. So in its birth is its death. So this actually applies to our own body. When the body is born, it must die. And this isn't actually like a punishment or anything personal. It's just the nature of birth. With birth, there is death. So if one reflects on this, one applies it to one's own body, the nature of this body is that it will die for sure. So this is the common reflection. And then to use this reflection as a way of developing wisdom. If this body's nature is death, and the death of the body is what you call an absolute, it's the nature of the body to die. That the body will not die is impossible. That the body has to die is normal. So when you understand that the body's nature is death, then you can reflect further thus. If something dies, can you keep it? And if you reflect if you reflect in such a way, you can see very clearly, without a lot of consideration, if something dies, you can't keep it. And you can also reflect thus. If something dies, can it be you? Or can it be yours? And if you reflect thus, if something dies, can it be you or can it be yours? The answer is absolutely no. If something dies, you cannot keep it. If you cannot keep it, you can't hold it, you can't maintain it. It cannot be you and it cannot be yours. So if you apply this reflection a bit further, you can reflect thus. If you cannot hold on to it, in terms of this body, if you can't hold it and you can't keep it, then what do you have to do? And of course, the natural result for many people is the kind of what you would call a small insight. If you can't hold on to something, you can't keep it, you have to let it go. So this is a very important thing to reflect upon with the body. If you reflect, this body's nature is death, my own body will die by its nature, so I cannot keep it, I cannot cling to it, I cannot hold on to it. Its nature is death, so therefore you have to let go of the body. So this is a kind of what you call a reflection, which is what you call conducive to aiding in meditation. It helps to decrease attachment to the body. And second reflection, following on this, is to reflect thus. Not only is my body of the nature of death, but all bodies are of the nature of death. So when you reflect thus, if you see thus, sometimes people don't have attachment to their own bodies, but when you see another body which you find attractive, or which you find interesting or special, then attachment tends to arise. So you can reflect thus. The nature of all bodies is death. That which dies, you cannot keep, you cannot hold. So therefore, the only possible kind of outcome of the body, or the only kind of outcome which is possible in terms of wisdom, is that you have to let go of attachment to others' bodies as well. So this is the second reflection, to reflect, my own body will die, cannot cling to it, you have to let go of it. All bodies die, just the same. You cannot cling on to them, you have to let go of them. The third reflection is to think or reflect thus. The thought which is arising presently, whatever thought I am thinking right now, will die by its nature. Because thoughts die by their nature, you cannot cling to them, you cannot hold on to them. And if you see this, if we reflect thus, the only thing which is possible to do with thinking and thoughts is to let go of thoughts. And then the fourth reflection is similar. All thoughts. One's own thoughts, other people's thoughts. Your thoughts in the past, your thoughts in the future, whatever thoughts there are present, internal, external, all views, all opinions, all of these are of the nature to die. Because they're of the nature to die, you can't hold on to them. Because you can't hold on to them, they're not yours, they're not you, and reflecting with wisdom, you have to let go of them. So if you reflect on these four things often, you can generally develop wisdom, kind of in everyday practice. You know that your own body dies by its nature, you have to let go of it. And also too, you can even reflect, do I have any attachment to my body? And if you look at that and see, okay, this attachment is delusion. It's not real. So you have to abandon it. There's actually not really any options. Reflecting thus, you slowly let go of your attachment to your own body. And then also reflecting, you slowly let go of attachment to others' bodies. And then reflecting on thought, you slowly let go of your own thinking. And when you do this more, the mind actually has the ability to slow down thought and to be still. And if one cultivates a non-belief in thinking, and a delight, and a happiness and a joy, and even taking a refuge in the stillness of the mind. And in the stillness of the mind is awareness. So this is the mindfulness, the awareness that we're trying to cultivate. So you can get to stillness through either delighting in stillness or also by reflecting. Say, for example, in these four things. Or also even reflecting another way. If one reflects thus, because the nature of the body is death, because the nature of thoughts is death, the nature of everything is death, the nature of moods is death, everything ceases, everything arises, everything passes away. Because this is the nature of everything, we have to kind of open the mind to this. If you reflect that the nature of everything is death, you can reflect even in specifically. Like if you were to think thus, if today was my last day of life, what would I do with it? And if you can reflect thus, this type of practice has two benefits. If you reflect, if this is my last day of life, or if this is my last hour of life, if this is my last minute of life, or if this is my last in-breath, or if this is my last out-breath. It's an excellent reflection also, too, when practicing. Say, for example, if you breathe in one single time, but you're not able to breathe out, you die. Or if you breathe out one single time, and you're not able to breathe in, you die. So this can be done with breath meditation, following the breath. Say, if I can't breathe in, I die. Or if I can't breathe out, I die. So it's just something to reflect on. But this is another way to get the mind to delight in stillness, to delight in awareness, to reflect. If this is my last in-breath, what do I do with my mind? Or am I prepared to die? So Or, for example, if you were to reflect thus, if this is my last day of life, what do I do with it? And if you reflect thus, this type of practice has two benefits. If you reflect often on death, your attachment to what is unimportant becomes less. If you reflect thus, if this is my last day of life, what would I do with it? So say, for example, if you had a lot of anger at a certain person, or if you had anger towards a certain other person in the community, and you were to reflect thus, if this is my last day of life, do I want to spend my last day of life being angry? Or do I really believe in what I'm thinking? Do I want to spend my last day of life caught up in delusion or being attached? So the first benefit of this practice is it helps you to abandon what is unimportant. The second benefit of this practice is that it helps you to reflect on what is most important, and then to do what is most important every day. And generally, when you let go of what is unimportant and you do what is most important every day, then the mind actually has a lot of happiness. There's a lot of freedom. It has happiness and freedom because it's doing what's most important every day. And it's also able to let go of what's unimportant. So the mind actually becomes more happy and free. So this is actually why mindfulness is actually supported by the Dhutangas, the kind of what you call the austere practices. So, say for example, just to mention a few of the Dhutangas, because I don't have a lot of time. Most of the Dhutangas are based on being free and simple. And some people actually reflect on the Dhutangas as being creating pain or suffering. But it's actually kind of not necessarily the best way to think about the Dhutangas. If you think about the Dhutangas in more of a happy way, if you think of the Dhutangas as that which leads to freedom, say for example, when the mind is busy and complicated, and say for example, it's stuck on something, you can see for yourself what that's like. It's very easy to see. When the mind is busy, it's unhappy. When the mind is complicated, it's unhappy. When it's stuck, it's not happy. But when the mind is more still and more peaceful and more free, it's happy. So this is the general meaning of the Dhutangas. It's helping you to be more free and more awake and more kind of unbound. So I'll mention one particular practice. There's a practice called Nisajik in Pali. It means it's called the Siddhis Practice. In the practice of Ajahn, he would try to get the monks to try to sit up overnight and practice, at least on once a week for every observance day, for the Uposatha day. And many monks still keep this practice. So say, for example, on the observance day, which was yesterday, you would actually overnight, you would stay up overnight and you wouldn't go to sleep. And you would just try to sit all night, or you would try to do walking all night, or you would try to do some combination of practice all night. So this is actually still practiced in Thailand, and still practiced at Ajahn Chah's monastery in Ubon. And I don't know do any of the monks here practice this? You stay up overnight? Do any of you? Okay. Did anyone stay up last night? No. No one? Okay. Okay. It's not required. Yeah. But you can do. Actually, the wonderful thing about the Dhutangas is you can experiment with them. You use them to help you to practice better. I remember actually when I was in India, I was reading Visuddhimagga, And I was very excited to practice the Dhutangas. I wanted to try to do sitting meditation all night, and I wanted to wear rag robes, and I wanted to try to eat little and speak little and be content with any kind of food which I received. And when I came to Thailand, one thing that I noticed personally is that the monks that were very, very austere were the monks who weren't very nice, and the monks who were actually very indulgent and more relaxed. They were very, very nice monks. So after a couple of months in being in Thailand, I actually decided that I didn't want to practice the Dhutangas because I wanted to be a nice person. Much more is much more important to me. So I kind of changed my mind temporarily. But then I kind of slowly began to practice the Dhutangas in a way. You do have to kind of notice if you become more tense and more tight and more unfriendly, then this is something you can see for yourself. This is your unwholesome qualities increasing and your wholesome qualities decreasing. So you know that this is obviously an incorrect practice for you. So this is just something to apply. But say, for example, if you know when you're practicing the Dhutangas, you suffer more, you have more difficulty. But afterwards, you feel more free and more kind and more open, then it's correct. It's a bit similar to kind of like a tiger. Ajahn Chah would generally say kind of what you do when you practice is like putting a tiger in a cage. So what you're doing in a way, you're kind of forcing the tiger to generally when you put a tiger in a cage, it will become angry. If you let a tiger roam free, it's content, it's all right. But when you put it in a cage, it becomes very angry. So training the mind is similar. If you let the mind do whatever it wants, it's actually relaxed, but it will slowly get worse and worse and worse. But if you train the mind, it will be unhappy at first, but it will eventually become better and better and better. So this is the nature of the mind. The mind, the Buddha said, the mind, like anything, can be trained. So when you train the mind, it's very common that the mind will experience suffering because of this difficulty. But through this training, the mind becomes more free and more happy. So for a lot of people, practice can be some suffering followed by great happiness and great freedom. So if you're seeing this initial suffering in practice, then sometimes you have to be patient with it. So with the Dhutangas, you do generally have to be quite patient and have to watch over a long period of time. As with many practices, you generally have to practice them for a very long period, sometimes for years, until you kind of see the results. Especially with meditation. Meditation you have to practice for many years. Kind of one of the best pieces of advice I got from great Krubajan in Lampang. He said, there's only one way to develop meditation, and that's slowly. So he always says this, slowly, slowly. But the one thing that he says all the time, you have to meditate a lot. You have to practice a lot. If you don't practice, you cannot get results. And it's like many things. If you do not put your full heart into your practice, you don't put 100%, then generally the results will be not 99 or 98. Generally, your results will be closer to 0 because you're not putting your full heart into your practice. If you put your full heart into your practice, generally your results will still be 0. But if you are able to sustain and keep practicing over a long period of time, then you get results. So this is why so few people ordain, and this is why so few people stay. Because you have to put great effort over a long period of time. And most people aren't willing to do that. So this is the kind of the great task for monks is to be able to push, to put forth effort, and to sustain that for years and years and years very difficult. So Dhutangas are the practice which support practice. So does anyone know how long I've been speaking for? Oh, okay. Probably have about another 10 minutes. Okay. So I'll actually speak about a few more Dhutangas. Another great practice, actually, the one is quite suggested by my Upajjhaya, my ordination Ajahn. One that he suggests quite a lot to people is it's called the Rukamula Senasana Dhutanga. It's the practicing at the foot of a tree. So this is actually something that you can do here. You can actually go and meditate in the trees. There's also meditating in a charnel ground. There's also meditating in an open field. So these are actually things which are possible to practice here. When the weather is cold, it's usually, it can be both good and bad. Sometimes if you can find a very nice patch of leaves, sometimes to be in the trees is actually quite nice. But if it's very cold, sometimes being next to trees isn't pleasant. So you have to kind of find the middle way. And also, say, for example, if you're trying to practice being in an open field, if you can find some place which has some sun and isn't kind of overrun with insects, you can kind of try and experiment. One thing that a lot of people find is that actually by watching nature, Ajahn Chah, he would actually teach meditation. It's similar to kind of the nature of a leaf. If you watch a leaf, nature of a leaf it tends to be still, but it's when the wind comes, you'll actually see that the leaf will fluctuate. So this is actually, practice is quite similar. The nature of the mind is actually still. The nature of the mind is actually awareness. But when the mind is moving, when the mind is fluctuating, it's being moved by thoughts, it's being moved by moods, it's moved by feelings of the body. So these are the things which tend to make the mind oscillate. And when this oscillating keeps going for a long time, it gives this appearance of being a self. So this is one of the very important things to do, is to very slowly learn to calm the mind down. And then when the mind is more calm, it will sit in awareness. If the mind can sit in awareness, then it has happiness. Because generally the energy of the mind, the power of the mind, when it's with itself, it pools, it collects. And this creates brightness of the mind. This creates happiness. This creates piti sukha. It also creates this, it's more like a sense of freedom, but it's the nature, the ability's mind to be open and aware just becomes more natural to the mind. The mind can actually be a bit similar to a pond, to a fish pond. If you have a pond with many fish, if these fish actually swim around a lot, and especially if these fish begin to fight with each other, then the water will be stirred up. When the water is stirred up, the dirt and the sand and the rocks all down below will get mixed up into the water. Water will become very cloudy. And so the more the fish swim, the more they fight, the more they act. The water will become more and more cloudy. So the mind is quite similar. When the mind is always continually thinking, and it's always following moods, it's always following feelings and ideas, then it will never be still. But it's the nature of a fish pond. If in a fish pond, you have the fish are able to be still for just a few seconds, then the very coarse things in the water, the kind of sand, the rocks, will tend to settle down, and the water will become slightly more clear. So this is actually a very natural principle that you see in nature. So the more that these fish can stay still, the more refined things begin to settle down. So it's just the nature of the mind. If you can help the mind to be still just for a few seconds, then the very coarse things of the mind will begin to settle down. And if you're able to sustain it slightly longer, then the slightly more refined things will begin to settle down. And finally, the mind will become more clear, more clear, more clear, more free. And it's also the nature of a fish pond. If it's dirty, you can't see very deeply into it. If say, for example, a fish pond is quite dirty and the fish are always quite busy and fighting, then you can only see about 5% of what's in the water. But if the fish are still and the things settle down in the water's clear, you can see 100% of everything. So say, for example, if you have in a fish pond, you have fish of various colors, and you have gold and silver and diamonds, and you also have rocks and rubbish and kind of different types of rubbish inside. When this pond is cloudy, you have no idea what's in there. If there's gold or silver or diamonds or rubbish, you have no idea. So our mind is quite similar. If you have a mind which is busy, then all the treasures of the mind are actually covered. So, say for example, a person might have kind of what you have, great bharami, great spiritual qualities, but it's covered up because the mind is cloudy. So this is one of the things that meditation does, is it opens up the potential of the mind. You can actually see your potential. You can find your good qualities and your bad qualities. So say, for example, when a fish pond is cloudy, you see nothing. But when it's clear, you can see gold and diamonds. So you can actually take the gold, you can take the diamonds, you can use them. And if you look inside and you can see rubbish, you can take the rubbish and you can throw it away. So this is quite similar with the mind. If the mind is always following its thinking and its moods, it will never be still. When it's not still, the potential of the mind, all the great things in the mind, all the horrible things in the mind will remain hidden. But when you meditate, when you practice awareness, you still the mind and you delight in stillness. You can even cultivate a love of stillness. And you can also cultivate a love of awareness. And when you do this, the mind becomes more settled, more clear, and then the treasures of the mind open up to you, as well as the rubbish, the kilesa, the defilements of the mind. So when you see the defilements, you can recognize them and abandon them. And when you can see the wonderful parts of the mind, the awareness, the kindness, the loving kindness, all the great things of the mind, you can find them when the mind is more still. So basically what this talk was actually supposed to be more about Dhutangas, but it's generally trying different Dhutangas and seeing what helps to make you more still and peaceful and aware. And it's not too difficult to see, but you do have to be quite patient with a lot of the practices. So basically, the thing I would emphasize most for the Dhutangas is that they're quite individual. And also in a person's practice, your practice will tend to change day to day. So it's more of a personal thing to try the Dhutangas and see how they work for you, but also try to be patient with them and see if they help you to be more peaceful, more clear, or more open. Does that make any sense? Okay. So I believe I've been speaking roughly for 40 minutes. So I believe I will, at this time, open it up for questions and answers. Or should I do a translation first?
I do the Thai first.
Okay. I kind of ask your permission. I'm going to try to translate into Thai. give a rough summary, if that would be okay. That's why I kind of ask permission. The อาตมาแค่อยากจะแปลนิดหน่อยพูดในภาษาไทยสำหรับคนไทยไม่รู้มีกี่คน อาตมาเมื่อกี้นี้พูดถึงปฏิบัติเกี่ยวกับดูทางวัดอันนี้เป็นความเป็นจริงส่วนใหญ่เวลาอาตมาพูดอาตมาพยายามอธิบายสิ่งที่จะสนับสนุนดูทางวัดแต่โดยเฉพาะอย่างยิ่งมีสิ่งที่เกี่ยวข้องฝึกสติกับฝึกสมาธิอาตมาพยายามอธิบายว่าสิ่งที่เป็นพื้นฐานสำหรับปฏิบัติก็เป็นที่จะฝึกแบบสัมมาทิฏฐิความคิดเห็นที่ถูกต้องแล้วก็ถ้าสมมุติว่าถ้าเราเห็นว่าสิ่งที่จะช่วยเราเห็นว่าต้องเห็นตัวเองมันปัจจตังต้องเห็นว่าสิ่งที่นี่จะเห็นเราแบบลักษณะที่อกุศลที่สกปรกมันจะลดลงตัวเองแล้วก็สิ่งที่ดีสิ่งที่กุศลจะเพิ่มขึ้นอันนี้สิ่งที่มันจะเห็นโดยตรงได้แล้วก็อาตมาอธิบายว่าดุจทางกวัดของเราเป็นสิ่งที่อาตมาก็อธิบายว่าเวลาอาตมาเขาอยู่ที่อินเดีย 1 ปีอาตมาช่วงนั้นอ่านวิสุทธิมรรคแล้วก็เวลาอ่านวิสุทธิมรรคเห็นว่ามีดูทางกวัดมีแบบ13มีหลายอย่างที่อาตมายินดีมากที่จะอยากจะปฏิบัติจริงๆแต่อาตมาที่อยู่ที่อินเดียปฏิบัติได้บ้างได้มาเยอะแต่ตื่นเต้นที่จะมาที่ประเทศไทยเพราะว่าประเทศไทยเป็นประเทศที่มีเทรวาสแล้วก็ที่เทรวาสถือดูทางกวัดดีกว่าที่ประเทศอื่นแล้วก็อาตมาตื่นเต้นที่จะพยายามปฏิบัติดูทางกวัดที่ประเทศไทยแต่เวลาอาตมามาที่ประเทศไทยอาตมาช่วงนั้นยังเป็นสามเณรที่สายวัชรยานสายทิเบตช่วงนั้นที่มาที่ประเทศไทยตื่นเต้นที่จะปฏิบัติดูทางกวัดแล้วก็เวลาเข้าไปที่วัดพระนานาชาติอาตมาสังเกตว่าพระที่นู่นที่ปฏิบัติดูทางกวัดที่เป็นนี่แบบสำรวมมากแล้วก็อยู่แบบกินน้อยพูดน้อยแล้วก็อยู่แบบใช้แบบน้อยที่สุดอาตมาสังเกตมันพระแบบนั้นจะเครียดมากกว่าแล้วก็พระที่อยู่แบบสบายแบบใจดีมากกว่าแล้วก็ในช่วงนั้นอาตมาเปลี่ยนใจมีความรู้สึกว่าอยากจะเป็นพระใจดีมากกว่า แล้วก็มีความรู้สึกว่าถ้าเราอยู่แบบเครียดมันจะปฏิบัติยากกว่าแล้วก็ไม่ใช่ว่าพระที่ถือดูทางกวัดอยู่เป็นไม่ดีแต่อาตมาแค่สังเกตอยู่แบบที่นู่นมีแต่พระฝรั่งแล้วก็พระฝรั่งก็ชอบเครียดแล้วก็เวลาเห็นพระฝรั่งที่เครียดแล้วก็ปฏิบัติดูทางกวัดมันจะยิ่งเครียดแล้วก็อยู่แบบสู้กันน่าดูแล้วก็มีความรู้สึกว่าอยู่แบบเอาแบบใจดีใจเย็นมากกว่าแล้วก็หลังจากนั้นอาตมาค่อยๆปฏิบัติแบบดูทางกวัดแต่ค่อยเห็นเหมือนกันสิ่งที่แรกอาตมาสังเกตอาตมาเห็นว่าเวลาปฏิบัติดูทางกวัดมันจะเครียดเหมือนกันแล้วก็บางครั้งอยู่แบบยิ่งคิดยิ่งฟุ้งซ่านไม่ใช่ว่าไม่นิ่งเท่าไหร่แล้วก็มีความรู้สึกว่าอึดอัดแต่อาตมามีแค่ต้องค่อยๆปรับตัวค่อยๆปรับตัวอยู่แบบใจดีใจเย็นต้องค่อยๆฝึกแล้วก็ค่อยๆปล่อยแล้วก็เห็นว่ามีขี้เหร่มันจะค่อยๆอยู่แบบขัดเกลาขี้เหร่แล้วก็ค่อยๆลดลงแล้วก็เห็นว่ามีผลดีแต่ต้องใช้เวลาหน่อยแล้วก็บางครั้งต้องอยู่แบบเครียดก่อน แบบชั่วคราวแล้วก็บางครั้งต้องรู้ว่าเวลาทำอะไรที่เป็นทุกข์เวลาร่างกายไม่สบายก็ต้องเป็นก็ธรรมชาติสมรับร่างกายก็ชอบคิดชอบฟุ้งซ่านเวลายิ่งมีเจ็บมีปวดก็ยิ่งคิดยิ่งมีฟุ้งซ่านแต่ว่า โดยดูแบบระยะยาวเห็นตัวเองว่ามีถ้าเราปฏิบัติอย่างนี้มันขี้เหร่มันจะค่อยๆลดลงค่อยๆลดลงแล้วก็เวลาขี้เหร่ก็ค่อยๆลดลงอยู่แบบใจเบาใจดีขึ้นก็ต้องดูแบบที่ระยะสั้นๆมีปฏิบัติดูทางกวาดมีแบบเครียดแต่แล้วก็ยิ่งคิดแต่ถ้าอยู่ที่ระยะยาวๆก็จะเห็นว่ามีความคิดฟุ้งซ่านมันจะค่อยๆลดลงแล้วก็ถ้าใช้ดูทางกวาดกับพิจารณาบ่อยๆอาตมาพูดถึงพิจารณา5 ข้อแรกพิจารณาว่าร่างกายนี้ตายแน่เราจะยึดถือยังไงถ้าเรารู้ตัวเองเห็นชัดบ่อยๆต้องพิจารณาหลายรอบไม่ใช่ครั้งเดียวถ้าพิจารณาหลายรอบร่างกายนี้ตายแน่สิ่งที่ตายแน่เราจะยึดถือยังไงสิ่งที่ตายเรายึดถือได้ไหมไม่ได้สิ่งที่ตายเราเก็บไว้ได้ไหมไม่ได้ถ้าเราเก็บไว้ไม่ได้ยึดถือไม่ได้ต้องทำอะไรก็ต้องปล่อยนี่เป็นสำหรับร่างกายนี้ก็ต้องปล่อยถ้าเราเห็นอย่างนี้ชัดมีความยึดถือสำหรับร่างกายเองมันจะค่อยๆลดลงไม่ใช่ว่าวันเดียวต้องพิจารณาไปเรื่อยๆแล้วก็ข้อที่2ต้องพิจารณาร่างกายคนอื่นร่างกายคนอื่นทุกคนตายแน่เราจะยึดถือยังไงเพราะว่าเวลาเราเห็นคนที่สวยหล่อหรือพิเศษอะไรเราจะมีความยึดถือเกิดขึ้นเวลามีความยึดถือเกิดขึ้นก็ต้องพิจารณาร่างกายคนอื่นตายแน่เราจะยึดถือยังไงแล้วก็เราได้เห็นว่าโอเคถ้าพิจารณาอย่างนี้รู้ว่าตายแน่สิ่งที่ตายแน่เก็บไว้ไม่ได้ยึดถือไม่ได้ก็ต้องปล่อยวางถ้าเราพิจารณาอย่างนี้ความยึดถือสำหรับคนอื่นมันจะค่อยๆลดลงเหมือนกันแล้วก็ข้อที่3ที่พิจารณาคิดความคิดที่เราคิดในปัจจุบันตายแน่สิ่งที่ตายเราจะยึดถือยังไงถ้าพิจารณาอย่างนี้บ่อยๆเราจะมีแบบถ้าต้องพิจารณาถ้าความคิดนี้ในปัจจุบันตายแน่เราจะยึดถือยังไงเราจะค่อยๆยึดถือความคิดในปัจจุบันน้อยกว่าแต่ปล่อยวางความคิดในปัจจุบันยากมากให้เราค่อยๆทำไปเรื่อยๆแต่ถ้าเราแค่พิจารณาต้องเห็นตัวเองหลายรอบต้องพิจารณาไปเรื่อยๆสิ่งที่เราคิดในปัจจุบันตายแน่เราจะยึดถือยังไงถ้าเราคิดอย่างนี้บ่อยๆไม่ต้องคิดชาติมันจริงสิ่งที่ตายเรายึดถือไม่ได้ไม่มีวิธีสิ่งที่ตายเราเก็บไว้ไม่ได้ไม่มีทางเลือกก็ต้องปล่อยวางอย่างเดียวถ้าเราเห็นอย่างนี้ครั้งเดียวมีผลดีเราเข้าใจชั่วคราวแต่อีกไม่นานเราจะยึดถือคิดไปเรื่อยๆก็ต้องพิจารณาบ่อยๆแล้วก็ต้องเห็นว่าเรากำลังยึดถือความคิดในปัจจุบันหรือเปล่าถ้าเราเห็นอย่างนี้บ่อยๆมีความสำคัญของความคิดมันจะค่อยๆลดลงแล้วก็ความสำคัญของผู้รู้จะค่อยๆเพิ่มขึ้นแล้วก็ใจค่อยๆสบายแล้วก็ข้อที่4ความคิดทั้งหมดตายแน่ความคิดของเราความคิดของคนอื่นตายแน่สิ่งที่ตายเราจะยึดถือยังไงแล้วก็สมมติว่าถ้าเราเจอคนอื่นที่มีความคิดเห็นที่ไม่เหมือนเราสำหรับพระอันนี้ก็พันห้าใหญ่ถ้ามีพระ10 องค์ถ้าเราทำว่าโอเคอาจารย์นี่สอนอะไรมีแต่10 องค์ไม่เห็นด้วย ก็เป็นธรรมดาความคิดเห็นก็เป็นกิเลสแบบละเอียดของพระอันนี้ก็เป็นสิ่งรวงที่พระก็เด็ดบ่อยๆแต่ถ้าเราพิจารณาอย่างนี้บ่อยๆต้องเห็นชัดพอสมควรความคิดทั้งหมดตายแน่เราจะยึดถือยังไงแล้วก็เวลาคนอื่นพูดไปมันเราก็ต้องคิดเรื่องนี้โอเค คนนี้องค์นี้ไม่เห็นด้วยเราแต่เราจะยึดถือยังไงแล้วก็เราไม่ต้องเครียดถ้าเราเห็นด้วยหรือไม่เห็นด้วยก็ประมาณเท่ากันก็ไม่มีความหมายเราก็ต้องปล่อยวางแล้วก็ถ้าเราพิจารณา4 ข้อนี้ร่างกายนี้ได้แน่ร่างกายคนอื่นได้แน่ความคิดนี้ในปัจจุบันได้แน่ความคิดอื่นทั้งหมดได้แน่เราจะยึดถือยังไงแล้วก็ข้อที่5ที่พิจารณาถ้าเราคิดถ้าวันนี้เป็นวันสุดท้ายของชีวิตเราจะทำอะไรดีแล้วก็ถ้าเราพิจารณาอย่างนี้บ่อยๆเราก็มีปฏิบัติอย่างนี้มีอานิสงส์2 อันสิ่งที่ไม่สำคัญเราจะรีบปล่อยรีบทิ้งสิ่งที่สำคัญที่สุดเราจะรีบทำแล้วก็ถ้าเราทุกวันปล่อยวางสิ่งที่ไม่สำคัญเราจะมีแบบความอิสระมากขึ้นแล้วก็ถ้าเราทำสิ่งที่สำคัญที่สุดทุกวันมีความสุขมากแน่นอนถ้าเราทำสำคัญที่สุดทุกวันมีชีวิตดีแน่นอนความสุขมากแน่นอนในระยะสุดท้ายของชีวิตเราจะแบบสบายมากเพราะว่าชาตินี้ทำบุญมากปฏิบัติมากปล่อยวางมากเจริญมากแบบสร้างบารมีมากมีทุกอย่างดีก็ทำเยอะเพราะว่าเราพิจารณาทุกวันอะไรสำคัญที่สุดเราก็สำคัญที่สุดเรารีบทำแล้วก็ถ้าเราคิดอย่างนี้อยู่แบบ3 เวกะเรามีแบบพลังพอสมควรที่จะปฏิบัติเยอะแล้วก็ถ้าเราปฏิบัติเยอะความสุขมากแล้วก็ถ้าเราฟุ้งซ่านอยู่แบบ100 เบนเพราะเรารู้ว่าถ้าเป็นวันสุดท้ายของเราหรือถ้าเป็นชั่วโมงสุดท้ายไม่สำคัญที่จะยึดถือความคิดเราจะค่อยๆปล่อยค่อยๆปล่อยแล้วก็ถ้าเราทำไม่นี่มันจะแบบค่อยๆใจก็เบาขึ้นละเอียดขึ้นเข้าใจไหมโอเคมันทุกอย่างก็พูดง่ายทำยากโอเคอาตมาคิดว่าช่วงนี้คิดว่าอยากจะเปิดให้โอกาสสำหรับ Q&A Okay, thank you very much for your patience, all non-Thai speakers. At this point, I believe I would like to open it up for questions and answers. Anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Ajahn. It's so nice to see, a Theravada monk smiling outwardly so much. So thank you. Do I have permission to share one quick reflection and then ask a question?
Please.
One thing I found really useful that you shared, that if today was your last day to live, what would you do? Because over the last little while, I've been battling charity projects, social service projects, or to meditate. So that was such a powerful question. I'm like, I would meditate. So it was perfect.
I do. Very good.
And in terms of the question, you've been through, a few different teachers and traditions. And similarly, me, I think, many Westerners, you see something in this tradition, Mahasi tradition, this looks great, long hours of Satipatthana practice, Ajahn Chah tradition, this looks great. So what advice could you give to like a Western beginner like me to how do I go about choosing a teacher and a tradition?
Excellent question. Unfortunately, finding the right teacher is very difficult. And finding the right teaching, as far as the teaching, generally you can start off with as far as like the Buddha's advice I was mentioning before, like any practice which you can see for yourself, where you can see it helps you to be more wholesome, and it helps you to be less defiled, or it helps you to be more peaceful, or more clear, or more, if you see it's developing wisdom, absolutely that's very correct for you. But as far as finding teachers, there's many great teachers still alive. And the one piece of advice I got from one of my favorite teachers, Luang Por Opat in Lampang, he said it's very important to, if you want to practice well and you want to advance in your practice, it's very important to have one teacher and one method. And he says this is by far the quickest. He says if you try to, it's similar to a person who has like a tray of different fruits in front of them. If they try to eat an apple and they also try to eat a pear, they're trying to eat a mango all at the same time, it doesn't really work. It just, you generally have to, if you really want to know, if you really want to eat a fruit, you have to eat just one. So, and it's not that one is bad and one is good. It's just choosing one which you feel a connection with and then sticking with that. Ajahn Chah used to give this simile. He said it's quite similar to people who start to grow a small tree and they put the seed in the ground and they water it and they give it sun. And then after some time, a little shoot will grow. And most people just by their nature kind of feel like, oh, actually maybe the dirt is better somewhere else. Or perhaps there's more sun somewhere. So they tend to dig it up and they move it. And then they bury it, and then for a while they're happy. And then after a while they feel again, there's probably better dirt or better sun or better water somewhere else. So they keep moving, keep digging up the tree and moving it, digging it up. So eventually the tree dies. So this is quite similar. So it's very difficult to meet the perfect teacher or the perfect teaching right in the beginning. So most people have to be very patient. But it's also quite nice. If you don't have your perfect teacher yet, then just do the best with what you have. And generally it's also believed that when you put sincere effort in your practice, that you bring about the conditions by which you can meet a teacher. So it's also a condition of when you're practicing to the best of your ability, you're creating merit and you're creating good karma and you're creating the conditions by which you can meet a teacher. But also too, it's a very, very kind of beautiful teaching. It's actually, I remember from Taiwan. It's the teaching of the when the cup is full, you can't put anything into it. So when you come to a teacher, try to come with an open mind and humility. Generally, a person who has a lot of self will have the most difficulty finding a teacher, and someone with less self will actually find it much easier to find a teacher and to listen. So just approaching with humility and open mind usually helps a lot.
Respect to Ajahn. Thank you very much for your Dhamma talk today. So may I ask you a personal question?
Please.
Yes. Do your family practice meditation too, especially your parents? Because I would like to know that how do you inspire your family to practice Buddhism? Thank you so much.
Yes. Wonderful question. My family is quite unusual in, well, it's actually not unusual. I'm from the US, and my mother is Catholic. My father is Jewish. And most of my brothers and sisters are Catholic or raised Catholic. But my family is quite diverse, as is quite common for the US. And I would say in my family, the only people I have who are Buddhist, I have one sister-in-law who's from Japan, and she's from Hokkaido, and she is Buddhist. And I have one niece and one nephew who are half Japanese, and my brother says that they're half Buddhist. So, but they generally don't practice meditation. So of my family, I think the only one who I know practices a little bit of meditation, maybe a couple minutes once a week, is my sister. And she does that as part of yoga. So as far as my parents, they don't sit meditation. I remember a story from Luang Por Sumedho, a bit related to this subject. When he was, I don't know if any of you know Luang Por Sumedho. He's a very senior Western monk. And he, many years ago, he went traveling to go to visit his parents. And but on the way, he traveled with one other monk. And so he stopped in New York and he met this other monk's parents. And first, that monk who was from New York tried to teach his parents. And his parents did not listen to him, not even 1%. And then Luang Por Sumedho, he said just a few things, and they listened to him. So he was actually quite pleased with himself. So he was able to teach this other monk's parents. So kind of seeing that he was able to teach this other monk's parents, he actually felt a lot of confidence and felt very happy. And then so later on, they went to travel to his house. And then he found the exact same thing, that his parents did not listen to him at all. And when the other monk taught, they listened to the other monk. So it's kind of it seems to be a general rule of thumb that you can't teach your parents. I'm sure it's not everyone, but for me, I find pretty much the same. But not that my parents are bad, but it's just that they have, my mother is quite Catholic. And so I'm actually trying to just be more supportive. And there is some type of meditation in Catholicism, but not a lot. And as far as I know, I haven't heard of much in the, I'm sure there is, but as far as my father, I've never heard of him practicing meditation. But for them, I asked a senior monk once if I should try to teach my parents or if I should try to give them advice or anything. And he was quiet for a few seconds and he said no, with for my parents, he said, I really invite you to just use loving kindness with them. Like don't try to teach them because they're not actually Buddhist. So he says, but the one thing that will work well is to use a loving kindness. So a loving kindness is something which is kind of what you'd call, it kind of goes beyond words or kind of teaching. So people will kind of naturally feel a loving kindness. And then when you have loving kindness, then the heart is more open. So it's kind of a bit of a teaching in itself. So his advice to me was just don't try to teach, but just do metta, loving kindness.
Good morning, Ajahn.
Morning.
Yeah, my question is that how can we apply the Buddhist meditation as a psychotherapy? Because of many people, they have lots of problems in their life, like mentally problems, and some of they lost their family, they have this kind of problems, and most of busy life people. So how can we apply as a Buddhist meditation as a psychotherapy?
Okay. I have to apologize in that I don't know almost anything about psychotherapy. So unfortunately, I can't answer your question to that extent. But as far as I know, of what little I know, generally in psychotherapy, I believe there's more of an application to psychotherapy seems to be based a bit in a Western ideal that that it tends to approach that the body is a self and that the thoughts are a self, and it tends to see moods as a self, and it tends to lean more on fixing things, whereas the Buddha, I believe, was far more direct in that he actually taught that the body is not self. And to understand the mind and to understand the body definitely takes a lot of reflection and a lot of work. But the shortcut of the Buddha is to let go. So it's more based on developing wisdom or faith or insight, and then through this, abandoning attachment. So in this sense, if this could be applied to psychotherapy, and I believe Buddhism definitely works, I have no doubt in Buddhism, but unfortunately I don't know enough about psychotherapy, but if you could basically tie in the idea of, you don't necessarily need to fix thoughts, and you don't necessarily need to fix moods, and you don't need to necessarily fix the past, and you don't even necessarily need to take care of the future. It has to do more with recognizing that the nature of all of these things merely arise and cease, and because their nature is to cease, then the natural conclusion for someone who understands them is to let go of attachment to them. So it's seeing the fault in attachment and seeing the happiness and the joy and the freedom of letting go, and then slowly training the mind to trust in that process. If you train the mind to trust in thinking, then it will naturally always be more thoughts and more problems. So that's actually why generally psychotherapy has no conclusion as far as I know. But it's actually one of my very favorite teachings of Ajahn Chah. He says, the reason he loves being a monk is the only thing which has a conclusion. Everything else in the world does not have a conclusion. So say, for example, if you're a doctor and you're healing people, there's always going to be more sick people. Or if you're a cook and you make food, there's always going to be more people who need food. But it's only monks and nuns. We're the only people who have a conclusion for our job, for our life. And so that's our gift from the Buddha. So we have and the Buddha actually gives many shortcuts. So, and one of the great shortcuts is you don't necessarily have to analyze everything. You have to see it as it really is and let go of it. So it's even some people, if they get too involved in the thought process, it kind of becomes a bit of a prison. And also the body. Say, for example, if you really think that you need to fix the body, that the health of the body is the most important thing in life, and it is definitely quite important. But if you're living on the premise that life is about taking care of the body, then you have a great delusion already. If you recognize that the body's nature is it dies, it arises and it ceases. That's its nature. Then if you see that, then as you get close to death, you're not as afraid of death. You can accept the nature of the body. And if you also accept this with the nature of thought is death. It ceases. So you don't necessarily have to correct it because it's gone already. So as far as analyzing or fixing, the Buddha's great shortcut is to see that it's gone already and to let go of it. But this, again, it's very easy to say and very hard to do. So you can also, if the kind of Ajahn Chah, one of his great teachings, which I quite loved, he generally taught that I have to translate this into English, but it's basically that the nature of the mind, the home of the mind, is awareness. So this is actually where we should be. This is where we should live. He says this is our real home. So if people can learn to trust in the awareness of the mind and learn not to trust in the thinking and the moods and the feelings, then you can develop a lot. But when you get stuck in thinking, when you get stuck in moods, when you get stuck in the body and various attachments, then you don't develop and you're trapped. So it's I believe this is the way it would apply to psychotherapy, is more training to accept fully, to open the mind, accept, and to let go. I believe more of a shortcut.
Respect to Prajahn. Thank you for your Dhamma talk about mindfulness of death. I want to share my opinion. I try to remind myself life must pass away and that passing away can happen now or at any moment. And I have a faith, homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. try to keep precepts as a norm, which proper for one's status. Now I keep 8 precepts.
Very
Try,
good.
yeah. And in particular, to have perseverance to attain enlightenment, Nibbana.
Santu.
And how about your opinion to recommend me to progress in this solution?
Santu. Okay. Yeah, it's actually interesting that my talk ended up being on mindfulness of death, because that happens to be one of my favorite subjects. My talk was actually supposed to be on the Dhutangas, so I'm afraid I failed miserably in that regard. But I think I covered at least 2, I think. But I tend to personally lean and incline towards reflection of death. It just seems to be a bit more of a natural practice for me. So as far as personally, I find one of the greatest benefits for me, which I find, is say, for example, when I wake up in the morning, I try to reflect on thinking, because the mind in the morning, it tends to go into thinking or thinking about the future or the past. So generally, as soon as I wake up, I try to reflect on the impermanence of thought. And I try to watch to see if the mind is leaning towards thinking, and if it has a natural propensity towards believing in thought. And then I can either try to direct the mind to stillness, if it will go in such a way, or to reflect thus. This thought by its nature will die. How can I cling to it? And if I can reflect on that, and then if the thought is able to quiet down, and I'm able to sustain awareness, then I feel that this is actually progress. And then from there, I try to develop a delight and a joy in the stillness. It's kind of, as it were, like, it's one Kruba Ajahn, he said it's a bit like if there were a small deer living in a forest, and this small deer, you wanted to be his friend. And so you went looking for the deer, and you kind of gave him a name, and you went around calling for him and looking for him. Then a small deer would naturally run far away from you because it doesn't know you. And what you're doing is actually correct. You're trying to find this deer, and you're trying to be friends with this deer. So you're naturally looking for the deer and calling to it. But unfortunately, small deer don't like to be followed. They're afraid. So what you would do if you wanted the small deer to be your friend, you would actually bring some grass and some honey and some water and some salt, and you would leave it at the edge of the forest, and you would speak very nicely to this deer. You would have to actually have loving kindness for this deer. So if you had loving kindness and you had patience, then very slowly over time, this very small deer would begin to come a little bit closer. And then if the small deer were to come closer and you were to get excited, and you were to get a piece of rope, and you said, okay, the deer is close, I want to catch it. And you go running after the deer, and you try to get the rope on it, then the deer would run far away and would not trust you. So this is actually what happens with mindfulness. When people experience a little bit of mindfulness, they're happy and they try to grab it. So this is actually a very common mistake. This is true with mindfulness, and it's also true with samadhi. So in practice, try to develop an idea of an intention of loving kindness, having this as the basis, and also great patience. So if you have any mindfulness, then use loving kindness for it, to try to develop a bond. So if, say for example, if a deer came, and then you were to see the deer and you were to think, actually this deer is not as beautiful as the other deer. I like the other deer better. Or if you were to think thus, this deer is actually kind of small. I like the other deer better, or I like the bigger deer. And if you were to tell this deer, you're not actually as good as I like, or I don't think you're very nice, then the deer would actually be offended and hurt and would not feel connection to you. So in practice, if you're critical towards yourself, if you have some mindfulness but you feel not good enough, or if you feel other people practice better than I do, then what happens is you become self-critical, and then your mindfulness gets weaker, or your samadhi gets weaker. So what you want to do is, no matter what, you try to keep developing loving kindness towards mindfulness and towards yourself and to others. But here specifically, developing loving kindness for awareness. And when you love awareness, awareness will slowly love you and trust you. And then when you build a bond stronger, it will love you more and more. So it's kind of, but it takes a long time. And you also have to remember too, when you have moments of loving, of awareness, to don't try to grab them, and don't when they're short, don't wish that they're longer, but to whatever it is, appreciate it, and then whatever comes, love it as much as you can. Try to develop as much loving kindness for awareness, and then it will generally love you. And also for silence. When you love the silence of the mind, then silence will come more and more. And if you trust it, if you like it, it will naturally trust you. And it will come more and more, and it will extend. Does that make sense? Okay.
Respected the most venerable, thank you very much for coming here, for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. So I've gained some kind of wisdom after listening to your Dhamma talk. And I have a question. When you mentioned about we should reflect on as today as the last day of our life. So we will know what is important and what is not important to do, right? So I would like to humbly ask you to give us a piece of advice, especially for lay people. How can we distinguish what is important and not important things to do? Thank you very much.
Very good. Okay. In general, like say for example, another way to reflect. For myself, just kind of mention it as a kind of a dream I had. Quite a few months ago, and in this dream I was with my brother in a large field, and it's just a dream. But and in this large field, I could see there's very large planes flying, and all of these planes are coming and they're crashing. And I see one plane crash and a second plane crash into the ground, massive explosion. And then the next one, I can see a plane is flying at me. And I could see it's coming down and it's about to crush me to death. So I know at that point I have maybe 2 seconds left to live. And then, so in this dream, my natural reflection is, how much practice have I done in this life? So for me, this is actually most important. How much have I practiced? So for me, as it were, like this would be the most important for my life to practice. And also too, I have a kind of a trailer thought in this, as my kind of last 2 seconds. I also reflect, how much merit have I made in this life? So for me, these would be the 2 most important things. Number 1, to practice, and number 2, to create merit. And as it were, and kind of in this practice is a very broad term. So practice can even be like developing paramitas, like spiritual factors. So for each person, what's most important will be different. And for each person, it will be different every day. So that's why this is a something to try to practice at least once a day or many times a day, and to try to keep this practice going for years, and then to watch it as it changes. Because one day you might actually find that you feel that practice is most important. And then on another day you might actually feel, I actually haven't made enough merit in my life. I really need to make merit. And on another day you might feel, I haven't developed enough barami, like spiritual qualities. So I really need to work on this area. So every day it might actually be different, but generally you'll find if this practice is helping you to go in a good direction. So this is actually something that Kruba Ajahns, kind of meditation masters or highly developed monks point to a lot. Generally look to see where the direction of your mind is going, and if it's going in a wholesome way, you can see you're practicing more. You can see that you're developing more barami. You can see that you're more kind, you're more patient, and you can see that your merit is increasing. And you can see that you delight in practice. You delight in making merit. Then you can see, okay, I'm going in the proper direction. And also you can see quite clearly for yourself, am I someone who is attached to the body? Am I someone who is attached to other person's bodies? Am I attached to my own thought? Am I attaching to any kind of thought or idea? So if you can kind of reflect and see if you have any attachment, are your attachments getting stronger or weaker? And when you deal with people, are you becoming more patient? And is your mind naturally more still and clear? And when the mind becomes agitated, does it go towards anger or does it go to Dhamma? Like it's kind of, as it were, have the simile of a fire. When a fire is great, it's very hard to put out, it takes great effort. But when a fire is small, it's very easy to put out. So it's the nature of practice. As defilements get slightly weaker, then it's easier to suppress them quickly. But it's not easy. But in general, the more you, as a tendency, practice, and the more as a tendency you develop merit, then it just becomes more natural over time. And so this is, for every single person, practice will be different. So it seems to be, in my opinion, probably more of an experiment to try different things at different times and see which works best for you. And some people like contemplation first. Some people like stilling more. So to try to experiment to see which particular combination works best for you. And generally from there, keep periodically keep visiting meditation masters or great monks, and keep asking advice and keep assessing. Like, say, for example, if you're practicing a lot and you're developing, then periodically you will come to some problems. So that's a good time to visit meditation masters or Kruba Ajahns. So just to kind of reassess. So, and also too, everyone is different. So some people find that they want to practice a lot and they want to make merit less. Or some people find they want to make more merit. Or some people find they like to listen to Dhamma every day. So for each person, it's a matter of experimenting, seeing what works for you. And then also too, it's naturally if you reflect on death, and you reflect on even the death of thought, then you naturally will stay on course much easier. When you don't reflect on death, and you don't reflect on the value of practice, you don't reflect on the meaning of life, then it's very easy to kind of lose your way. So it's generally, if you find you're going in a good direction and you're developing, then you can kind of see for yourself that that's probably proper for you. But it's, as far as I've seen for most people, it's quite individual. So it takes a lot of experimenting.
Thank you so much, Ajahn, for your Dhamma talk. You talk about 4 things that we have to remind ourselves every day, and the first one and the second one is quite clear for me because our body and another people's body. And for the third one and the fourth one, I want you to give more example
Okay.
about our thought. How can we deal with them, and how can Ajahn.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So the third reflection that I was speaking of was the thought which I am thinking at present. So it'd be like whatever you're thinking right now, that this thought which you are thinking at present is of the nature to die, to cease. So the reflection is actually, when you're doing this reflection, you even try to watch the thing that you're thinking, the process by which you're even reflecting, even the reflecting process. Even this thought, it's arising and it's sustaining and it's continuing. So it's trying to actually look at thought in thought. So you're kind of watching this thought which is present. Its nature is death. So if you're reflecting, looking at the thought at present, then if you're able to stay with it and watch it, you can watch it fade and cease. And if you're able to stay with that awareness more, and not follow that thought as being a self, but more like awareness is the seat within where the thought is arising. So it's almost a bit like a flower within a flower. So the awareness is actually more like the base. And thought arises in awareness. So if we're always following thought, then we don't tend to see the awareness, which is actually the base or the seat of the actual thought. So when we reflect on thought, we're watching the thought and we're watching it cease. And then what's left behind is awareness of the thought. That should actually be as it were, like you're kind of watching this open and close, but it's actually the awareness which is holding the thought. So if you slowly begin to question the top flower, which is the thinking, or even just the thinking process, and just watch it sustain and then fade away and cease. As it ceases, if you're actually going to another thought, this is it's quite common that thoughts tend to link up. But if you're just trying to develop awareness, which is watching the thought, then the thought is going and then it fades away and it ceases. So try to develop a trust in this process by which you can watch the fading away and ceasing. It's almost more of an experiment. You just kind of try over time. See if you can watch it and let it fade away and let it cease. Another thing you can also do is actually a bit more of a kind of a panya practice, a wisdom practice. Just see if you can hold a thought. If you, in a way, like if you think, if this thought is mine, okay, I'll try to keep this thought and see if it's possible. And try over and over. Okay, this thought which I'm thinking right now, I'll keep it for as long as I can. So when you try to do this, you realize your thought is just going to arise, fade away, cease. And that's its nature. So then, through reflecting on this, watching this over and over, then the power of thought begins to decrease. And your kind of, as it were, your relationship to a thought begins to change. Does that make sense? So it's more of an experiment. Just try to see if you can trust in the watching of the thought and not the thought. So this is kind of like what you would call like the, in Thai this is called Puru, which is like the one who knows. Like try to be the knowing, the one who knows, and not the actual thought. And then if you see the thought and just watch it, its nature will generally be to fade and to cease. So thoughts are very quick. So there's two problems, is keeping up with them, and being able to see them clearly, because thoughts are so quick, especially for people who are quite intelligent. They're even more quick. So you can use intelligence to train the mind. It's kind of a practice of Sariputta. It's training the mind, always training the mind. So using reflection to follow thought and to watch it cease. And you can even reflect, okay. You can directly see for yourself the cessation of thought. So you can also see there's spaces in between thoughts. So pay attention to the thought and pay attention to the space afterwards. Does that make sense? And then through this process of seeing thought, a little bit of space, then you're learning and saying, okay, this is arising, this is fading away, this is ceasing. Does that make any sense? So it's easy to say and hard to do. So it's like more of an experimentation process, just watching. It's a practice of Lumpur Sumedho. One of the things that he would do is he would take a very ordinary sentence. I think he used the sentence, I am a human being. So he would say over and over, I am a human being, 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 I am a human being. So he would say it 5 times, and on the 5th time, he would put a space in between the last 2 words. And he found that by training the mind like this, to repeat a sentence, to repeat it, and then to leave a little space, that the mind could be still temporarily. And then he realized, okay, it is possible for the mind to be still. And then from this point of allowing the mind to be still, to simply try to extend half a second, 1 second, 2 seconds of stillness. So the stillness is it's a very close friend with awareness. When there's stillness, awareness is kind of arises. So, and in the stillness, if you sustain this stillness, you're sustaining this developing awareness in the stillness, and then you slowly try to extend. Or, if you wish, reflecting over and over, just watching the thought arise and cease, arise and cease. Okay, it's ceasing again, I can see it. Okay, it's ceasing again, I can see it. Or even reflecting thus, is it even possible to keep a thought? Does that make sense? And so this would be the 3rd reflection, and the 4th reflection is more along the lines of when you say, for example, if someone speaks to you and they have views which are different, if they say, for example, they think meditation is a waste of time, or they think that you should never reflect, you should only still the mind, then sometimes you kind of think, oh, I don't agree with that. Or, I think this is correct, I think that's incorrect. But if you reflect thus, all thoughts, their nature is to cease, to die. So therefore, because they die, you can't keep them, you can't hold them. You have to let go of them. So the shortcut to this is when you hear other people's opinions, you know you can't keep it. It's nothing yours, it's not you. And you have to let go of it by its nature. So you have a bit of a shortcut in that when other people give you opinions, you can reflect. This is an opinion, that's all. Because it arises and ceases, it's not me, it's not mine. They don't have a self. This is anatta on their part, and this is anatta on my part. So if you believe in other people's thoughts like they're real, then that's actually delusion. So when you reflect on it as it truly is, it's just a thought. And thoughts are just have the nature to arise and to cease. So the natural conclusion is to let go of other people's thoughts as well. Does that make sense?
Yesterday I talked with one of my friends, and he talked about when people admire me or say something good about me, like before I will be happy. But now try not to feel bad about it. And when people say something bad about me, I also feel bad. The good way, but the practical similar to the thought down from you guys.
Right.
He has a good thought.
Yeah. Well, I would kind of say that, like for example, if you're complimented, and if this makes you happy, then it would be quite good to reflect. In either case, if it made you happy, then try to look at the happiness and try to see, even in the happiness, is anatta, is not a self. So, say for example, if someone is thinking in a wholesome way, kusala, like a wholesome way, this is actually correct. But attachment to any thought is actually part of delusion. So delusion is unwholesome, but wholesome thought is correct. So it's kind of I believe it's a sutta that Ananda taught. You use thinking, which leads to the ending of thinking. You use an attachment, which will help you to cut off attachment. So it's like a skillful means. So if in your practice, it's helpful to develop wholesome thoughts. And actually, here's just kind of in one way. If you see your reaction is unwholesome, then one thing you can recognize, okay, when this happens, my mind becomes unwholesome. So then you can say, okay, this is not what I want. So when people give you a comment, good or bad, then try to keep the mind wholesome. But another way to also practice this is to reflect. The things which they're saying are not real. It's not me, not mine, and it's not them, it's not theirs. So you can either train the mind in terms of being more wholesome and letting go of the unwholesome, or just in general to let go of everything. So it's more a matter of experimenting, seeing which works best for your practice, and trying and working on it over time. So it's generally, if you find the mind is getting stuck in unwholesome things, then train in wholesome. If you find that you are attached to thought, then train in letting go. So they're both correct. Does that make sense? I actually have to apologize. I forgot my mask. I thought I brought it with me. Okay, M.
That was the last question.
Okay, that was the last question. Yeah.
Student will come to and respect.
Junadi, you want questions? No? So on behalf of all practitioners, so I would like to say thank you so much for your kindness that you give the Dhamma Talk for us for today. Your Dhamma Talk is very helpful and useful for us to apply to practice, improve our practice inside meditation. And right now, I would like to invite the representative of the practitioners to offer the gift to Than Prajan. So now I would like to invite Dr. Suthida Suwanvesho. the representative of Peace Study in Thai program. And next, I would like to invite the representative of IBSC student, Sister Yang Jin Park from Korea.
Okay, can everyone hear me? All right. Okay. I was just asked to thank you very much for inviting me and for listening. I'm sure I said some things which are helpful, and I'm sure I said other things which are not helpful. So I hope most of all that you are happy and well, and you continue to practice. And if there is ever anything I can do to help your practice, please let me know. And if there's anything I said which is incorrect, I apologize sincerely. And I hope that we can practice together in the future. And yes, in general, thank you very much for your kindness and your patience. And I will now give a blessing in Thai, or Pali actually. Yatha variva pura pariparenti sakarang Eameva ito tinang betanang upakapati Ichitang patitang tumhang kipameva samijantu Sape purendo sangkapan chanto panrasoya tamani joti rasoya sambitio vivachantung sambharo goinazatung Mante Bhavan Vantarhayo Sukhi Dikayo Gombhava อัมบิวัตนาสิลิสานิจังอุตตาปจายโนยะถารธรรมวัฏันติอายุวันโนสุขังบาลัง
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Now I would like to invite everyone to pay respect to ท่านพระอาจารย์สุนันโท together. อัญชลีวันทาอภิวาทอัญชลีวันทาอภิวาทอัญชลีวันทาอภิวา